When Jordan asked me to introduce him, I thought it was actually really fitting because I probably wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for Jordan coming into a course on global social movements that we were in the anthropology department together, and he really just had an illuminating presence. And I remember what you presented on. It was the history of the usage of the word democracy. Specifically with regard to how it was used in the United States in the formation of, it was very, very interesting stuff. And yeah, Jordan's just a really nice guy that I reached out to and asked him about the PCC program and books and different things to look into. And I really just felt more and more and more called. And then taking a course with James, and then one thing led to another, and now I'm here. So thanks, Jordan, and I really look forward to this. So.
So yeah, I've been doing research with a PCC alum for the past 8 months or so. His name is Jonathan Rubenstein, and I've been looking at different things that communities are doing, different sort of alternative economic strategies. And that's basically what I wanted to share today. Fortunately, yesterday was my first psychedelic experience. So I realized that it's going to be a little hard. There are other things on my mind, so it's going to be hard for me to kind of be present with you. So earlier today, I just decided to write down my thoughts, and I would read them. I know that's not the most ideal situation, but I will be present with you better this way, I think. Okay, so I want to begin with the grounding assumption that I believe the economic system today is at the root of most of the biggest problems we are facing. This is obvious enough when we observe the way in which market forces today structure and organize the vast majority of human activity. And we are now beginning to realize the tragic consequences that result from this. This form of organizing activity and value by anonymous market forces, which are so poor in human intention and which are only tangentially shaped by real human needs. So the question I want to ask today is, how do we opt out of this system that has proven so indifferent to individuals, to communities, to the planet itself? And I think that people are developing strategies towards that end. But I want to begin with a few key observations. The first of which is that I think it's become obvious for a lot of people today that the state's primary role is in ensuring corporate profitability. In other words, it seems to be more and more reasonable to assume that the state is not going to rescue us either from our ecological crises or our sort of social problems. The other key observation is that it seems like the issue today is really at an institutional and political level rather than the level of objective reality. In other words, I mean, we live in the most productive economy in the history of the world, so why do we still have social problems? So I think it's a political question and not a question of some absolute limit or barrier to our global well-being. Let's see. Another thing that I think is emphasized a lot is that the economic model that we have today is one that works only with constant growth. I think we've all heard of that. I think it's like around a 2% growth rate, and anything less than that we experience as a recession. And again, that's a paradoxical thing to think about because the economy is tremendously productive. There's immense abundance, and yet if we do not have consistent growth for some reason, there's a recession. And so I wanted to explain kind of one reason why that may be. So a large part of the explanation that I've discovered is the way in which money is created today. I think we have the assumption that the government creates all the money that's in circulation today. In fact, they only create the physical dollars and coins that we carry around. But that's a small portion of the actual money that's in circulation today. I think some figures estimate that about 97% of the money in circulation today is actually digital currency. And that money, most of that is created by private banks. So whenever somebody takes out a loan, that money is created out of nothing, and it comes with interest. And so, yeah, you can look it up, it's true. You wouldn't think. But yeah, so that in itself wouldn't be such a terrible thing. It wouldn't be so bad if private banks make up money. The issue is that they also ask that you pay back interest. And then you have to ask, who's creating the money to pay back the interest? Nobody is. Well, go ahead.
I am.
Oh, you are? How so?
Well, they created the loan, and where does the interest come from on top of that loan? I have to pay it back to them.
That's true.
So according to them, they're going to receive that interest from me.
No, absolutely. What I'm saying is, who creates the money into existence that will pay for that? So there's interest, but there's nobody creating money to pay for that interest. I'm talking at a systemic level. I know on an individual level you have to pay your interest. I understand that.
Abstract. It doesn't actually exist, but
Yeah.
the concept is that I would generate it somehow.
Somebody has to.
Well, you take that from somebody else. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Let's see, where's I at? All right, yeah. So that's the reason why debt is such a ubiquitous issue today, why it's become sort of a political issue even, is because there's perhaps more debt than there is actual money in the system today. And I think this explains a lot of things. This explains why we are in where we are crisis prone in the economy. It explains why even cities and entire countries can default or have severe debt problems like we do in the US today. It explains why austerity is not a good strategy to work, because when you have austerity, what you essentially do is you shrink the money supply. Yeah, I don't need it. That's fine. You essentially shrink the money supply, and when you shrink the money supply, obviously there's less money to pay off your debts, so there's more defaults. So, anyways, if you hear politicians talk about austerity, you should look the other way. But above all, this monetary system explains why it is that that we have to have this constant economic growth, right? Because when you have money that's created as interest-bearing debt, then you have to have more economic growth to take out more loans to pay for that, right? So you have this circular process. And so I think that is one of the better explanations for why it is that we have this abundant system that nonetheless needs constant growth. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so what do we do about it? And this is what I've been studying basically. I think I'm just going to read some of this actually. The new option that I'm going to talk about now is grounded in building resilient and increasingly self-sufficient communities whose food, energy, economic, and cultural needs are met primarily at the local level. It is about building direct relationships and associative ties with the people nearest to us, and in rediscovering our capacity to meet our needs together through mutual support and reliance. And I think I'm increasingly finding that I think that this is a strategy to meet our cultural and spiritual needs as well. And I think I'm going to try and address that towards the end if I have time. Okay, so what are these strategies like? I'm just going to run through a list. This isn't all of them. This is just the ones that were kind of in my mind when I was writing this, or the ones that I know about. So one of which is transition networks. There's actually a group called Transition Network and Transition US. And what they do is they offer resources and support for people who want to self-organize and do these kind of local initiatives. So whatever you're interested in, maybe it's local food production or your group of people is interested in, they tell you or they give you kind of good resources to know how to do that, how to navigate the sort of legal framework that you might be having to negotiate with. So yeah, that's an important one. Transition networks, worker-owned cooperatives, local currencies, local food production, supporting local small business, their public banking solutions. In fact, that's probably one of the stronger options for getting out of our current monetary policy is to kind of have this public bank option that would then recirculate the money back to people. And alternative investment strategies. And that's actually the example I wanted to talk about, which is one of those. So we've all heard of Wall Street today, especially after the Occupy movement. And Wall Street, I think, is shorthand for the increasing financialization of our economy today. And this, in fact, is not a new phenomenon. Historians who have looked at this find that this is kind of the kind of dying phase. It's a sign of autumn, in other words, of an economic system. So what you have is a kind of three-part movement of kind of establishing an initial productive zone, increasing the kind of productivity until you reach capacity or the market is saturated, and then you turn to financialization as a way to make more money. There's a history of that from I think what was the first. I mean, if you're starting like 700 years ago, there's a book on this, Florence and Venice and Italy in the Renaissance, and then it moved to Genoa and the Spanish Empire, and then I believe it moved to the Dutch system, and then on to the English colonial empire and to America today. And it's interesting if you're wondering how America became sort of the hegemonic economic power. A lot of it has to do with World War II, which saw like this immense buildup of America's productive capacities to make war supplies, but afterwards they became industrial. And also our economic competitors were largely, they sustained a lot of damage, right, in Europe and whatnot. So that was kind of the grounding of America's economic, hegemony or whatever. All right, where was I going? But the financialization of the market, I think we're also realizing, is that it has real consequences for real people. People lose their houses. There are fewer jobs. There's less jobs because production has moved overseas here. A lot of that stuff we've heard before, and it also leads to increasing wealth inequality. And here's where the strategy comes in, that still there's millions of everyday Americans who unknowingly invest in this. They automatically invest in this through their oftentimes retirement funds, whether it's pensions, IRAs, 401ks and stuff, or just through purchasing stock. They're invested in this system where their money is essentially drawn out from Main Street to Wall Street, and it's kept there and it just kind of sits there. And in America, it's a lot of money. It's like some $30 trillion. But that's money that people, investors who are kind of switching over sides, are looking at and saying that would be of tremendous value for local community development. Half of our economy is in local small business. It's actually not in the big corporations as much as it would seem. And yet those big, oftentimes multinational corporations are the only thing you can invest in the stock market. So the different strategies they're looking at are, and a lot of this has become a possibility after changing up the securities laws, which has just recently happened. And what they're looking at is things like local and regional stock exchanges, direct public offerings, which allow small businesses to raise capital. And that's really the issue of local development, is that for a long time they have not been able to raise capital in an easy way, which is the kind of startup money you need to start a business. But a lot of that's changed with new laws that are slowly being implemented. The SEC is they're dragging their feet a lot with it because it's so new, but it does offer the possibility of this. Let me see. Crowdfunding is also part of that whole strategy. I guess I'll read this. And again, this is This is from a book that was written in 2012, a really good book on the topic called Local Dollars, Local Cents by a guy named Michael Schumann. And he's describing this gap between Americans investing in these corporations through Wall Street versus investing in local communities in which the effects would be would have a direct positive impact on their lives, rather than have to do with corporate profitability. So he makes this kind of visionary idea of what this would look like scaled up. But yeah, I'll just read it and talk about it. So, well, he imagines what will happen when the first amount of money leaves Wall Street and is invested in these local initiatives. So Fortune 500 companies that have been long kept superficially healthy by automatic pension fund investments will see their share prices plummet and their assets shrink. More mainstream investors will look to local alternatives, which will depress prices on the stock exchange still further. And this capital flight could occur with dramatic speed and result in the largest and most monumental shift of money in human history. I know that sounds kind of fantastic and kind of utopian in the bad sense of the word. I know there's definitely a good sense of it. And yet I think he has a point in that really there is the possibility now to have an equal investment between the local initiatives, which should be roughly 50% of people who are investing money, and the more multinational corporations. Does anyone know why the stock exchange exists? What's its function? Anybody?
To allow the rich to get richer?
Yeah, I think that's part of it now. Originally, though, it was created as a way of getting money to corporations that actually were in America, right? And that those corporations could then expand. And so people who were invested would see both a small financial return for their investment, but more importantly, it would be part of the overall economic well-being of the country. Of course, that's not the case today anymore. With most of the companies that are represented on the stock exchange are multinational corporations, meaning that they do not have, they're not loyal to any one country, right? And so that's why we do not see that the kind of real economic value of these that are more than just the sort of small financial return. And that's what this strategy is about. It's about getting that back into actual communities. And so that was just one example. Obviously, all of these I think would be interesting at scale, and I'm really optimistic about I guess the future because I've been looking at so many different of these initiatives, and there's a lot of people doing interesting things, coming up with interesting strategies and solutions, and yet. I want to address two other points about this idea of localization and democratizing parts of our lives. The first of which is that it has value even beyond itself, which is that it has value as a way of building sort of a political constituency. In other words, building different movement centers. And this has been the case with every that I know of. Every actual political transformation requires that these things actually exist. So in other words, like the civil rights movement was the example I wanted to use. That it would not have happened, right, if there were not pre-existing movement centers that were there long before the kind of revolutionary fervor took off, and those were there for the purpose of turning that interest and desire for political change into action. But those had to exist beforehand. And I kind of see all the different things that are going on now in terms of localization, alternative economies, as a way of building that, building the ground up. For that, let me see. And yeah, but I also want to say that I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in doing these things themselves. In themselves, they're kind of mundane solutions, but I think that there is a sort of latent utopian possibility in them. In other words, I think our lives are so much, well, one, like I said earlier, dictated by market forces. It's what you do, it's how you get money, it's maybe doing a job that you don't want to do. And I think a lot of people are in that position. What was I going to say? I forgot. In other words, it's about community development, right? And I think that that has cultural value as well. And let me see, I think, yeah, I don't know. I think I'll wrap it up. Yes.
Yeah, I loved your presentation. I thought it was really very clear explanation of sort of what's going on. And I loved your mundane acts, which are utopian. I think that's really cool because recycling is mundane, or it should be, but it's so integral to the process. I was curious. I think I read in a anarchist vegan cookbook that the only way we can avert total ecological catastrophe is if we peak our impact by 2015 and have a 90% reduction in that impact. So I know you're optimistic, and I was just wondering how you saw sort of how we could make that the rate of transformation essentially in economic terms. Maybe if you could speculate about what would need to happen for that, what you see that looking like.
Right. Yeah. You mean in terms of like ecology?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're talking at a very macro level,
Yeah.
and just in terms of what sort of economic regulations are out there and the incentives that they're creating, like the Earth Law was a good representation of those metrics of what I think we're sort of wanting to see. I was just wondering if it seems like a lot of mundane acts have to happen at a very large scale, I guess. And macroeconomically, I feel like a lot of institutions would have to collapse or transform into like completely new institutions that have a completely new mission statement or impact. I'm just wondering, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I think the things that I was talking about is kind of an initial step to delinking from those systems that you're talking about, right? And I think that's part of that's not a solution in itself. That's not the end-all solution, but I think it's a strong first step. And importantly, it's something that people can begin to do for themselves today. Yes, Sean.
Thank you, Jordan. That was very inspiring and impressive degree to which you're penetrating at a systemic level and a fine-grained level. I look forward to learning more from you about that, what you're doing. I'm wondering how you see the proposals that the direction you would like to see things going in as an alternative to where they are. How do you see that related to sort of a Marxist analysis, particularly when you began, so happy you began with this black box of the currency system, basically, that almost nobody can see into, and it's very, very hard to conceptualize. But the simple idea that currency is privately owned, in fact. So instead of being, along with being alienated from our labor, most people, we're alienated from the very currency that is used to, and so on. So what you're proposing in a way seems to be a kind of Marxism 2.0 from the ground up. Can you say anything about that?
That's really
very favorable to.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Yeah, I've definitely been reading a lot of Marxism, but I tend to think of Marxism as kind of an intellectual methodology, and I kind of see these as, I mean, perhaps they're related insofar as it's about kind of finding ways to disengage from the alienation of parts of the system, definitely. But I don't see these as being guided by the people that I've studied and heard speak on the topic. Don't seem to be guided by Marxist, particularly perspectives. But I do see some correlation between the two. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Jordan, I want to applaud and salute your talk. I worked for 28 years for Wells Fargo, and I can tell everybody that what Jordan is saying about money and how it's created is actually true. And it's actually quite scary when you realize that not only do we need growth in order to kind of feed this beast we created, but growth, even according to the keepers of that machine and that narrative, is probably something that we're not going to have. And so it's almost difficult to envision a scenario where there could be an orderly transition to the kind of more sustainable, holistic economy we're talking about, which isn't very pleasant to contemplate, but we need to prepare however we can. My question for you is, how has your work in PCC informed this kind of pure, hard-on economic discussion that you've given us, which I really, again, appreciate you doing, because I think it's a little bit of the elephant in the living room, because we all live our lives and we have our economic lives and have to pay rent and so forth, and yet we talk about these lofty ideas and philosophy and so forth, and we got to somehow connect the dots, and I'm wondering how you've done that in your own life and in your work.
Yeah, well, I haven't started to do it in my own life yet. I hope to. I think this does relate to my interest in PCC insofar as I think my interest in PCC and coming to the school was my intuition that it was a living community, a living sort of community of philosophy. I didn't know about the actual community, right? I just mean in terms of a living sort of philosophy, and that's what called me to it. And I see this work as sort of a way of potentially making more possible the realization of more communities like this that are living. Because I think we're also in a cultural crisis, and I think that has a lot to do with the market. And I think it has a lot to do with capitalism and our inability to sort of have real human relationships. And I think that's where philosophy and art come out of. And I think perhaps we've forgotten that, historically speaking. And so I see them as related. Yeah. I also, it's, I think, a Saturn-Neptune thing. I'm kind of into this stuff, so. Yeah.
If the banks print all the money, why didn't Lehman Brothers just print up a bunch of money? Well, then how did they get it? Okay, so it's digital. Why didn't they just punch in some numbers?
So they do, and then that money disappears, though, once the loan is paid off. It's the interest that's the kind of new money, right? It's the interest that's the thing that's unaccounted for and that drives the system. So you create, say, a mortgage for $300,000. At the end of 30 years, that's paid off. But the interest that gets paid to the bank was money that wasn't created anywhere else.
So someone has to lose.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what creates predatory capitalism.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like someone has to lose their money for someone else to have enough money to pay back the interest on top of it.
Exactly. So paying off your debt. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Yes, Michael.
So I'm kind of thinking of this scenario where you're saying that the economy and capitalism itself sort of creates a cultural crisis. And I'm wondering, what part of us do you think creates capitalism so that we can in turn create a cultural crisis?
Yeah.
I think, especially in our community, wash our hands with the fact that there is no capitalism without us, without desires that we don't want to live with.
Yeah. So I think it's realizing that we don't need to make this thing like capitalism was this thing that was planned out beforehand. That's the issue, that it's lacking real human intention, that these kind of micro decisions that people make, a random group makes, a government, policy, bureaucrats, whatever, then have these tremendous consequences that overlay such a long time, usually through laws, but also sort of through economic means. So I think the issue is that why capitalism is now such a sort of cohesive and totalized system, now we have a problem, right, of disentangling ourselves from that. But I don't think it was created out of sort of human kind of impulse. I think it was just kind of these small decisions that were not really well thought out. Yeah.
So manslaughter versus first-degree murder.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys.